Rob Parker is co-founder of the National House of Prayer in Ottawa, Ontario, along with his wife, Fran. As he's worked within the halls of Parliament to get people praying for our government, he's also become passionate about equipping people of faith to have an impact on society. What does that look like during this federal election? Rob is here to help us find out more. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here, yeah.
It's exciting times in Ottawa right now with the election happening.
Oh, it's a buzz. Everyone's running around and reading the latest blogs or latest headlines in the newspaper.
Or the stats that are coming out.
Stats are coming out, the polls, all of that.
Probably a good time for you guys to be praying and supporting our elected officials, right? A lot of stress.
It's time for the church to really rally in prayer, to be honest with you, to be calling on God. And actually, I think to rally together and to discern, well, what is God saying? What about our nation? Is it a time to pray, or how does that look when it pertains to government? A lot of times people don't have those two where they come together and understand that the church can be involved in every realm in our society, including government.
We can get kind of complacent, can't we? Just like, oh, it's all happening, and sometimes we don't even get involved. We've got our own lives, and what's going to happen is going to happen.
I think that's the majority.
In certain parts of Canada, right? You feel like my vote doesn't even matter.
Well, our votes do matter, and honestly, I think biblically people don't even understand that voting is biblical. They would say, "What? Are you kidding?" Well, it is. It's in Deuteronomy and Exodus, where the people were told to choose their leaders who would represent them, which was brilliant, of course, because if they complained about that leader later, well, they were the ones who elected them.
Yeah, and exactly.
So people don't understand that even voting comes from ancient Jewish tradition, and it's biblical.
Wow, I've never heard anyone say that, but I think a lot of people are, I don't know, disillusioned about voting, or like I said, regionally, sometimes you feel like, oh, by the time it gets to my part of the country, it's already decided, and my vote doesn't matter. I talked about this recently about how Christians need to vote, and I actually got a letter from a viewer who said, Sandra, she wrote me and she said, I think Christians don't vote because they believe all politicians are corrupt and they don't want to be involved with that. I'm considering denying my vote, which I feel is a better way to handle it because my denied vote will still count.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's unfortunate. I think we need to take the time to develop relationship with those who are candidates. Sometimes we just write off everyone because of a one bad apple kind of thing, where we need to take the time to learn what does this person feel about family? What do they feel about where our society is going? How do they feel about the future generations? And and I think they'd be surprised to understand that the vast majority of members of Parliament that we've met, I would not put a broad stroke that they're all corrupt at all. I've seen many, and I'm not just talking about Christians, who are really there to try and make our nation a better place.
Yeah, and I should mention for Sanders as well, you actually can't deny your vote in a federal election. It's only in some provinces.
It's only in Ontario and I think Manitoba.
Yeah, I think there's one more. Ontario, Manitoba, one more. But it's only a
Alberta.
Provincial. Alberta, that's right.
Yeah.
And federally, you can't actually do that.
That's correct.
But you have a relationship with so many of these MPs personally, and there's, you can say to Sandra, there's hope. There are good officials, people who are in it with a good heart.
Absolutely. There are those who, I've seen members of Parliament absolutely moved because of what they're trying to pass on to the next generation, and knowing they're there, some of them, okay, for sure, they're there to do a job and they're waiting to get their pension, for sure, but not the majority. The majority I've seen, and that's across the parties, are really honestly trying to do a good job for our nation.
Well, you're really passionate about this topic, and you've written a book, We Have a Voice, Equipping to Affect Change in the Public Square, and really you wrote it for this election to equip Christians.
Yes.
And, some of the things you talk about is so helpful. One thing is, you say, you want to answer the question, should we just vote for Christian politicians as Christians? Do we need to have a politician that shares our faith?
Well, as I mentioned in that book, I think it's wonderful when Christians do step up and enter into the political arena, but in our research about that individual, we need to know that they can do the job well. It is great that they have the values of a Christian, but in addition, they need to be able to function in that arena and do, as I said, do the job really well. We've seen examples where Christians have not voted for things that we thought a Christian would vote for, or non-Christians vote for the things that we thought a Christian would vote for. So we have to be careful to think that just by voting that we're not kind of trying to pull out an easy card, well, I'll just vote for the Christian. wait a minute, we need to do our homework, find out what they believe, and vote accordingly.
We get so lazy about that. And that brings me to my next question, which is, should we just vote on one issue? So say, a lot of Christians are very passionate about life issues like abortion, for example. So I find somebody, who agrees with me on that. Is that the candidate that I choose?
Again, that's an issue that it's very sensitive, but it's wonderful when we do have a member of parliament, as far as I'm concerned, who will stand for life. But again, how do they stand for all the other issues that are really vital for Christians? We need to understand, too, that there are so many areas in the public square where Christians need to be having a voice, and where the society needs to be familiar with that Christian voice. So, where we could talk about prostitution, we could talk about the poverty in our nation, we could talk about our economics, we can talk about our policies around the Middle East. There's so many other areas. And if we are only one issue voting, then all those other areas are not they don't really matter, and they actually really do matter in our nation for Christians.
It's really about doing your homework. I mean, that's really what I'm hearing. And, sometimes the media is kind of where we get all of our information. And many times the media can be biased in one direction or another, right? We can't just count on the media. So I'm telling people to vote and to pray and everything else, but we can't just count on that. We have to do this responsibility for ourselves.
That's right. I really do believe that within that book, I've done all I can to help equip people to, here's some questions you could ask about that candidate. Where do they stand on this issue or that? Or how are their views coming across in this way? Are they seen in a way where they are completely under the umbrella of that party's their platform, or are they slightly off of that a bit? We need to understand the individuals before we just vote. They've got to be this way or that party, or I won't vote for them. There's 19 federal parties registered in Canada.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that
19.
many. Wow.
And so, we can find out who is running in our region and what do they stand for.
And I'm really passionate about this voting issue. I think because I've spent a lot of time working in development around the world, and I go to so many countries where people are literally dying for the right to vote.
Absolutely.
They're at threat to show up, if they even have the right to elect. If they do, many times they're threatened at the polls, and they're risking their life for the privilege that we take for granted and can't be bothered to register and can't be bothered to show up and can't be bothered to research. How can we get people motivated to get out and vote and to know that their vote matters?
Well, one, for a start, there's so many close elections in Canada. There were I think over 100 ridings last elections where it was decided on with a few hundred people, a few hundred votes. So the vote really does count. We need to first get that. We need to understand that God expects us to vote. I think that's critical. He expects us to have a voice in society. Thirdly, I think we need to understand that if we don't vote, others will vote, right? And so when we're missing that Christian voice in society, what will their values be? How do they value life? How do they value the elderly? How do they value education? Do they consider parents as the first educator or primary educator of their children or not? So there's all those kinds of issues. If we don't vote, what does that say to future generations? What are we passing on to them? What kind of a debt will we pass on to them? Where will religious freedom be in 10 years from now?
Yeah.
So you see, it's very, very critical to have a voice right now.
And not just for our life, but Canada is a big player in the world, and we have huge impact on the world as well.
You bet.
One of the inspirations for writing this book was that you felt that the Christian voice in culture is being sidelined more and more. People are saying it's private and you should keep it private. What's wrong with that? Is it private or is it public? Or is it both?
It's both. I can't be married on a Sunday to God and divorced the rest of the week. My God said, I'm with you always. So I need to be walking in that relationship with Jesus as a 24/7 Christian, because I have a 24/7 God. And sure, I need to be smart. I need to be wise in how that faith comes out, how it plays. I shouldn't just be a Christian who wants to be opposed to everything in our society, but rather, why not be a Christian who's proposing rather than opposing? Proposing things that are actually good and wholesome and helpful to all of our society.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard a lot of Christian leaders say that they feel this election in particular is extremely significant, and it's not just about us, it's about our impact on the world stage, the difference we're making in the fight against terrorism and refugees and so many issues around the world, poverty. How can people pray really quickly here as we close?
We need to, one, pray that God will direct the people in how how we should be even voting. We need to pray for uncorrupted elections. We need to pray that what happened in last elections won't happen again, that there will be, the voice will be heard of the people of the nation fairly. We need to pray for a rallying around righteous decisions and righteous individuals in government that are trying to do the best they can. We need to be that church who is more united in that prayer. I really believe that prayer makes a difference. And
you see it every day.
I do. And like 72 hours prior to this election, we're holding 72 hours of continuous prayer at the National House of Prayer. And people can go onto our website to find out how we're being led in prayer. They can reply to us, or they can even show up at the National House of Prayer and pray with us.
I love
for these
that.
Elections. Yeah.
For more information about that and to get your book, what is your website?
NHOP.ca.
NHOP.ca. You've heard it here. Thank you so much. You're so inspiring. We appreciate the work you're doing in Ottawa. We are cheering you on.
Thank you.
And if you're watching this, I hope you got the message today. Pray, vote, get informed. We want you to be involved.